Hey everyone, welcome back to another Facebook Live. I'm your host, Jess.
And I'm your host, Lauren.
And today we are back with a familiar face who you guys will recognize from some of our more recent Facebook Lives this year. Kristen is here to go over some more professional etiquette. And today we are talking all things email. But before we jump into that, Lauren is going to give us all of our Facebook Live tips. So take it away, Lauren.
Thanks, Jess. So, we really want this conversation to be interactive today. So, please feel free to leave any questions or tips that you would like to share about email etiquette or just professional etiquette in general in the comments section. Or if you have any questions for us, feel free to drop those in the comments as well. We just ask that you don't give away any personal information because the comments are very public. So if you would like to talk to us directly about anything related to your program, or if you're interested in starting a program, you can call Student Services. That's if you're currently enrolled as a Penn Foster student. That phone number is 1-888-427-1000. If you are not a Penn Foster student but are interested in learning more about our programs, the number for admissions is 1-888-427-6500. Also, this is an open conversation today, so feel free to tag anyone you'd like to join or share this with any of your friends and family members. So, all of that out of the way, let's get into the good stuff. We have Kristen with us again. She is our expert on everything careers, hiring, professionalism. And as you're all thinking about your next step, you're taking your program or thinking about taking a program, but really your end goal is you want to have a successful career after this. So that's what you want to help to prepare you for. So, Kristen, I'll let you talk a little bit about your role and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love doing this. I love being part of this. It's always so meaningful to me. So I appreciate it. So I work on the talent acquisition team here at Penn Foster. I have been in the HR recruiting business for about 4 years now. I've been working on that 4 or 5 years. I love it. I had the pleasure of being a career coach before this, so helping students and even colleagues prepare for the workplace, get ready and what to expect, the do's and don'ts, and kind of what's out there to know and how to best approach it when the time comes. So I'm appreciative for you to have me here. I'm happy to talk about this. I think it's something that we could all use a little help with. Is there's things out there that's everything's changing all as we go through time, right? There's things that we know we have to do and not do. So it's helpful to know when you get out into the work setting, what's a proper etiquette for when you're communicating versus when you're communicating on the personal level. So this topic I think will be really helpful for many people. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you
Yes.
for joining. We have a lot to pick your brain about today. So, we're going to go through
I'll
why
try.
email etiquette is important, creating a professional email, some do's and don'ts for that, creating a professional email signature, something that we shouldn't overlook, using professional language, and to your point, Kristen, very different than language that you might use in a personal email, what to avoid in a professional email, and why writing professional emails does make a difference in the hiring process.
And so with that being said, I think it's important to start with why email etiquette is important and why it means it really could make or break your communications with people professionally. So, Kristen, why is email etiquette so important when it comes to your career?
Right. It is because it's their first, real introduction to you. As a person, you want to make the great first impression. So besides, helping you in the job search, knowing how to write professional emails can be, huge help in the workplace, allows you to avoid miscommunications, shows others that you respect them and that you know what you're talking about. It's very important. That's the first thing that they're knowing about you is your communication style. It gives a little bit into your personality, but also how well can you communicate? What can you spell correctly? Are you using correct grammar? And those sort of things. So it's very, very important that you know the difference between the professional and the personal.
I think too, in certain jobs, a lot of your communication that you'll be doing will be over email if you work remotely.
Right.
But even if you are in person, there's still a good amount of emailing that you might be doing with clients or customers that you're serving, with your boss or your manager. So this is something that no matter the role, it will be important to almost any job you can have. So
Absolutely.
I know people are wondering practically what some of the big do's and don'ts are for a professional email. What do you think,
Right.
Kristen?
Right. And the first step to having to be being a before you even create the email is having a professional email address. So you want to make sure that, the typical now is to have your first name, last name at Gmail or at whatever server you use. Try to refrain from any personal, other things that aren't really professional. So your name is the best way to go, or some combination of your name, so that that appears more professional. When you're applying for jobs, the first thing that they'll see on after your resume is your name. You want to make sure you have a professional email address, your name, your phone number, list your pronouns if you have preferred pronouns. And so use a trusted email provider as well. Free Outlook or Gmail. It's helpful to use a modern service provider like Gmail. You can use this email address for work, school, or anything important. So you can have your fun email address for other things, and then a professional email address for the work related things. So also, it's important to have a clear subject line when you're creating any email to your colleagues or to, say your boss. And keep in mind, this doesn't just apply to emails. You may be communicating with them over like Teams messengers or other things. So it's even though you may think of those things similar to a text on a phone, it's not. You're still doing it in a professional setting. So you want to make sure that you're clear, that you're not using slang, that you're not using too many emojis. So it's a little different than texting. You want to make sure that, here's another tip before I even talk about like what to do and not do in the email, is write the email before you put in the person's email address. So that way,
That's a good tip.
You're writing the email, you may be changing things, you may be editing, you want to make sure that your email is good to go. In case you accidentally hit the send button, you don't want an email that you're not fully ready to send to go to that person. So enter the email address last.
That's
and
such
then
a
when
good
you're
piece of advice. I have definitely made that mistake before. I would say even if
yes,
you're responding to someone and if you hit like that reply function will automatically pop their email address, I take that out until I have my response crafted and then put it back. If it's
that's a
something where you
really
need to like think about it a little bit more because you really don't want to get stuck sending
Yeah.
something you didn't want to send.
I think we may have all been in that case. And if you haven't been in that case yet, here's a tip. Don't put it into
Avoid it.
last.
Don't learn the hard way.
Well, and then be careful with when this is another just kind of side note with the reply all button. Use that very cautiously. Try not to hit reply all if you don't really need to. And again, when you're copying people, copy people that need to be copied, not everybody. But you'll know the situation. It's just be cautious with those sort of things. So we want to start with a subject line that pertains to what's in the content of the email. Just a quick, that's very direct. If you're applying for a job or if you're asking a hiring manager, it would be, interested in XYZ position at your company or some kind of, opportunity. I'm looking for this opportunity, just so they know right away. Another good thing to go by, sorry, I'm talking with my hands a lot. Another good thing to go by, I'll do it down here, is
I do the same thing.
is people people tend, and this is based on like surveys and studies, people tend to read about 3 sentences of an email to really try to get the idea of what it is you're asking for in the email. Who are you? Why are you emailing me? What is it you're emailing me about? And so try to be as concise as you can in explaining, hi, I saw your job. Hi, my name is Kristen Schenck. I saw your job posting. I'm very interested in this role. I love to meet up with you. My available times are. So it's very clear who you are, what you need, what you're trying to get from them. And then you're going to sign it in a very professional way, either with sincerely, respectfully, best, those sort of things. In the greeting as well, it's more professional to use good afternoon, good morning, dear, instead of even hello, and you use their name. Even the word hey it comes across as unprofessional, and certainly not yo or anything like that. So we try to
Yeah.
and then using like abbreviated things like LOL or OMG and emojis, those can come across as unprofessional, especially if you don't know the person.
Right.
Now, if you have a more comfortable relationship and you're working with them, that's different, right? But you want to make sure that you include that. So another thing to be mindful of was when you're when you are receiving emails, professional emails, is make sure you're responding to them in a timely way. 24 hours is the best practice. Within 24 hours, excuse me, if it goes more than 2 or 3 days, it's going to come across as unprofessional. So try to be more, timely with those emails when they come in. I'm going to stop for a minute because I think you probably have stuff you want to ask me, and I'm once again rambling.
Kristen, here's the thing though, your rambling is always full of great tips and tricks. So like never a problem, never an issue. I can definitely agree too with what you just said about the timeliness of your emails. And I think that goes back to earlier when we were talking about how you can have a separate email for your professional emails and a different email for like your promotions and all the emails you get from all the stores and your social medias and things like that. Because as we all know, I'm sure there are a lot of us watching right now who your little email button on your phone says like 10,000 emails, right? If you're signed up for like every store, every online shop, they're sending you promotions every day. You could get those professional emails that are important can get lost in the shuffle. So if you have a separate professional email account then that you're checking every day, then you won't, lose that important stuff with all of the junk, so to speak, that you get from, companies and things like that. So I think that's definitely a really good point. And you also said, in the first couple lines, who you are, what you're writing about, and what you need and what you're looking for. I think like if you keep those as your first 3 sentences, then you're getting across, exactly what you want to get across. If that person's only going to read the first couple of lines before they click to the attachment that might have your resume or something in it. So I think that's a really good tip as well. But I think another big piece of email creation is your signature line, right? Because once you create it within your program or your, whatever email provider you use, it's going to probably stay the same as you email people. So what are like some of your go-to tips and tricks for what should be in your like email signature line for professional emails?
Right. In your email signature line. And just to step back for a minute, the font that you use for your email should be a standard size, like 12 point standard, right? Anything smaller than that could come across as spammy or unprofessional. You don't want your email to look like a spam email. That's the last thing you want it to look. It's also important that you use fonts that are easy to read, like New Times Roman, Arial, Calibri, things that are easy to read. If you use things that look kind of silly or goofy or fancy or hard to read or in weird colors, or like, not that it's a weird color, but if it's a hard to read color, it comes across as unprofessional and it's hard for them to read. So it's already kind of a negative thing. So keep in mind, 12 point, a font that's easy to read. Even for your signature, as we were talking about, as we get to your signature doesn't, try to keep it just a normal font that you can read, just the same as the rest of the email. Using the calligraphy or the signature fonts that are kind of fancy are hard to read, and it comes across as a little bit unprofessional. So I would keep it standard format, very consistent, very concise. That's not to say you can't have a longer email. It depends on what the email's about, right? But in those first 3 sentences, you wanted to kind of talk, here's why we're here, right? And then, if you need to follow it up with more information. But in the signature part, have your name. So I have my name, I have my preferred pronouns. So that lets people know what I'm comfortable with, what pronouns I'm comfortable with using. It lets them know that I'm comfortable with using their pronouns. It lets them know that they can share theirs. That's a matter of respect for everyone and showing that, we're out there to help. So I have my pronouns, I have my email address in there, my phone number, and if I have a LinkedIn profile. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, which is something we had talked about in a previous session, or if you want to know more about why you should have a LinkedIn profile, that is a professional networking site. So if you have a LinkedIn profile on your resume and on your email, that just gives them a link. They can look more about you, but also shows that you're in that professional network. So did I miss anything that you guys are thinking of from a signature standpoint?
The only thing I was thinking of, because I had someone talk about this recently, is there are tools online, if you Google them, if you have a name that can get mispronounced, you can find one of these like tools on the internet. If you just Google like email signature name reader, and it'll like either AI or you could like record how to pronounce your name and then hyperlink that recording in your email signature. So if you're trying to signal to like a potential employer, someone you're communicating with, how to pronounce your name correctly so that they're more comfortable with that, that's kind of a good way to subtly throw that in there.
I've seen that a lot lately, and it's very, very helpful. LinkedIn does. People do it for LinkedIn all the time, and it's very, very helpful. Yeah. And keep in mind, like, these things are, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just saying that's a really good thought, because if you don't have a name that's difficult to pronounce, it might not be something you think about. But if you do run into that issue, it's nice to have that available for somebody who's going to continue to communicate with you, so that you don't run into that awkward moment of them pronouncing your name incorrectly.
Right. Absolutely. And then we go back to the basics. Like when you're writing an email, you need to make sure that your spelling is correct, that your grammar is correct. There are tools that you can use, the grammar and Grammarly and the spell check. Have someone proofread it. Read it and read it again. We've all done this, right? We write something or we type something and we're reading and it looks totally fine, right? And we keep missing the typo because our brain is changing it to the correct word every time we read it. And then someone else reads it and it's clear to them. So if you're read it and read it again, have someone else read it if you need to, just to make sure that it's as most professional as it can be when it's coming across.
Yes, I can definitely agree with that.
I think, Kristen, a lot of what you're saying, the big theme in professional communication seems to be show that you care about the person who's reading it and show that you respect the person who's reading it. So when you type out words fully, I think that's a respect thing. Or when, if you use a font and a font color that's easy to digest, it just shows that you cared about how they're going to read it and you care about their time and, being concise and giving them the upfront information that you don't want to put any extra work on the reader to comprehend what you're trying to get across. So that seems to be a really big theme in everything that you're saying in terms of how to write a good professional communication.
Right.
Yes.
Try to use succinct sentences, not long-winded sentences.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of resources that can help you with that as well. So
If you're asking someone something, put it in bold, or make sure that, it's very clear what you need from them too, I think is another big one.
I think
right.
that's a really good
Your
point.
recipient guess.
Absolutely. And try to avoid from getting too personal with them, sharing too much about your personal life, or asking them personal questions. It's professional. Keep it professional. Again, it depends on the relationship you have with them, but especially if you don't know them, you've never communicated with them, then keep it on the utmost professional level and not too much into the personal.
Yeah, I know you've given a lot of tips on like some things to do, and we've touched on a few things to avoid, like being long-winded, using slang. Is there anything else that someone should really look to avoid in a professional email?
Try not to use all caps. That comes across as you're shouting or being aggressive or being dramatic, or it doesn't read well. So we would say stay away from using all caps, the creative fonts. Obviously profanity is totally out, totally out there.
Yeah.
Trying to think. I have some notes here too I'm looking at to make sure we've covered
about
everything.
like who you include on the emails? Because I know depending on what information you're sharing, some of it might be more sensitive or more personal. So double checking who is CC'd and who the audience is to make sure that you're not saying anything to the wrong person.
Right. And you don't want to over copy everything. You don't want to copy so many people who don't really need to be copied, or just stick to who really needs to know and include them. Right.
Yeah,
and that's going to be adjusted based on your audience. Correct.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think too, I was just thinking, and I just thought of this too, when you were talking about different fonts and different colors. A lot of different people are reading emails on a lot of different devices now, like whether you're on your laptop or you're on your phone or you're on a tablet, and you on your screen might use a color or a font that looks a certain way on your screen. You're like, oh, this is perfectly readable and very easy to digest. And then when it might come across somebody else's phone, or if their computer's a little bit older or something like that, the format might look completely different than it looks to you. So you're probably always just better off sticking with, your black, easy to read fonts, because even if they look a certain way to you on your computer screen, the resolution that somebody else might have might be significantly different, and you might think you're portraying yourself one way and it comes across very different to that person on there.
Yes, that is a huge point. A very, very good point, because it happens with resumes all the time as well. So yes, so it's good to have something that's very common, very simple, very plain, very easy to read, so that it's not causing that person any issue to read that. So,
and I also want to
think
about shout out to, you mentioned before Grammarly. I just use even the free version of Grammarly on my computer, and it saves me so much with emails, with presentations, with so many things. It's such a great tool. You brought it up before, and I'm like, I need to advocate for that program, because I'm a big believer in it, and I think it's very, very user friendly and a really good thing to have.
Right. Yeah, it just goes back to showing you care too. If you take the time to proofread, if you take the time to make sure there are no grammar or spelling errors, because again, those things make it harder on the reader to figure out what you're trying to say. Taking that time to do it in advance is going to make you look better, because it shows that you're thorough, you're detail oriented, and you're taking work off the reader to understand what you're trying to get at.
Yep.
And I think that really comes into play too if you're writing emails to communicate with a hiring manager, because it's one thing if you know your coworkers and you have a little more leeway. It's another when you're trying to stand out to get a job. So Kristen, specifically from the hiring manager perspective, can you talk a little bit about professional communications when you are in the process of applying to jobs?
Yes. So I think the best way to go about it, and I'm just going to kind of talk about like how you should go about reaching out to them, right? So you're looking for a job, you see a job, you see, an email or perhaps someone you can contact. Or if it's, submit your email here and you're not sure who it's going to, it could be going to the hiring team, the HR team, the hiring manager. You don't know where things go. So, or who ends up with emails, right? Sometimes we get emails and I get them. They're not necessarily for me, so I send them to someone else. So you don't really know who the email's going to. So, if you know the person's name, best to address, them by name, dear so-and-so, otherwise, dear hiring manager. Make sure the subject line is clear about what job you're looking for, right? Interested in the opportunity of the instructional designer role or the XYZ role. And then simple as dear Carol or dear hiring manager, excuse me. I always start with a hello, I hope you're doing well today, or I hope this email finds you well, or something along those lines, recognizing, you're taking time from them, hope your day's going well.
Setting a positive tone too, because I think if the recipient goes into it feeling, cared for or positive as they read your message, they're going to look at your email more favorably.
Right. Absolutely. So it sets the tone. They're looking that you want the job. They're looking for your motivation and your personality. So, hi, my name is Kristen. I am, interested, very, very excited to see your job posting, interested in meeting with you to talk about the role. You could put, so that tells them exactly what you want to do, right? Then there could be a sentence about, I have worked many years in XYZ, or I have just completed my program in XYZ. I'm looking for an internship, or I'm looking for an entry-level position, or I'm looking to get into this sort of role based on my knowledge. It's in line with my career goals, could be in line with what you're looking for. Hopefully it's a good match, something along those lines. And then I'm available for, I look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully we can set a time to meet. And then it would be sincerely, respectfully, warmly, have a great day, comma, like those could be your sign-offs, or kindly, something like that.
Yes,
That's how I
agree.
would approach an email. And I mean, I can even type this out, and we can put it in the chat, of how you kind of approach in a very concise way that gets your message across in a kind, hey, I'm ready for the job. Call me.
Yeah.
Yes.
So about being concise too, and utilizing a good subject line, because if a hiring manager, anybody that you're talking to, sees your email but needs to come back to it later, you want to make it easy for them to search. So if a hiring manager needs to search through all of their applicants for a certain job, putting that job title in the search bar, make sure yours comes up if they're going to look at it again. So that's why it's definitely important to make sure being super clear, and maybe using some of the words in your email that the recipient may be looking for if they're searching for it later on.
Yeah. And even a step further, Lauren, like making the professional email address, like you want to make sure, like if somebody's like, oh, I read that email the other day and Kristen, it was from a Kristen, that they can search your first name and you're going to come up. It's not like your email is like, I love Daisy's 234, because your name's not in it, and it's going to make it really hard for them to find it later. So that's a really good point of being able to find it later, making sure that everything that you want to put forward is there, so that they can find those things later on.
What is the biggest faux pas you guys have seen in a professional email that really struck you as like, oof?
I think we recently, there was a piece of like, I can't even remember what it was, but like the slang terms sometimes can feel very odd in certain situations, especially when it's an email that has multiple people on it, or you know some of the other people in the email chain. So I think just trying to stick to not using those slang terms, because something like that can really make or break, how the whole package comes across.
Yeah, the relationship. So you think of it as a relationship building. Like anything you do in life is a relationship building with that. So I mean, you think of it in that way and go from there. I mean, profanity is always just, it's just not
never ever. That's a never ever.
Putting down other people. Like, it's even worse than doing like we're saying, okay, emojis and LOL, and that's unprofessional. But what's really, really bad is the profanity and the negativity towards other people, or just being offensive to, like, just those kinds of things you don't want to come across as.
Yes.
And there's one other thing I wanted to say. If you're going to include any like links, say you're applying for a graphic designer position, right? And you have a link to another website or to something. It's, instead of having like the big long link, hit right click, edit that link, shorten its title to something else. That makes you look even more professional than having the big long link there.
Hyperlink it, and
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a big one that I've recently been trying to hyperlink a lot more, because it just looks so much nicer. Like even in like Slack or Teams or any other like communication, if you use a hyperlink versus dropping a big long QXY80 nonsense, I think that also just comes back to, again, the respect piece. You're respecting somebody's time. You're making it very easy for them. You can find that link here, and the word here is hyperlinked right out to what you want them to go to. And I think, that is just being, you look smart, you look respectful, and you look like you value that person's time. And I think that's
also,
I agree.
Everything's a competition, right? Like if you're applying for a job, you have competitors. And if you're at work and you're emailing your boss and your colleagues, the people around you are still doing those same things. So you want to set yourself apart as being professional in all of those settings. Sorry, Lauren.
Oh, I would just maybe think of something else too. If you're going to talk about a document or a link, even if you sent it to your audience a few emails ago, don't put them through the work of having to go back a couple of emails to find that link. That is the worst. It's the worst. If you're going to reference a document or a link or something that you need them to know, even if you sent it to them already, attach it right in the communication that you're asking them to read right then and there, because if you're making them do homework by going back, they're not going to do it, or they will be extremely annoyed.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And also to the point of attachments is make sure the attachments work, like test them. Before you attach something, like make sure it works, make sure that once it's attached, it can be open, make sure it's the correct attachment, those things.
Yeah.
Good point. Good things to be. We're bringing stuff up as we
know, because we're thinking about it. Yeah, I know. If we think about emails that have annoyed us, I feel like the list goes on. Another thing I thought of too is if you have a bunch of people that you are sending the email to, and you're asking for feedback, or you're asking people to take an action, be crystal clear who needs to review, who needs to give feedback, or who needs to take that action, and give them a deadline of when they need to respond to you by, so that there's no frustration on, now it's 2 days later and no one responded, because they might not be sure, did I need to respond, or was that really on somebody else? Did I need to respond today, or is this something I can put off 2 days? So just make it really, really clear who needs to take an action and when they need to take the action by.
Yes.
Also, if you have an email with a bunch of people on it and you're all talking about one subject, and then you switch talking about to a different subject, but it's the same group of people, but it's the same email thread, change the subject line to the new content. So
Yes.
when they're trying to search back for that piece of information, that it's with the right thread and not with the old thread. And you're like, where was
Yes. Yes.
So
Could not
that's
agree
one thing
more.
I thought of this morning. I'm like, oh, right.
Yes. Really, really good tip.
I think this was like all of these tips are like obviously like Lauren said, if we just thought through like emails that we've gotten that have just not been the best emails, I know we could go on and on. And but like at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that being polite, being respectful, and putting your best foot forward and making yourself look as smart and as intelligent as you possibly can when it comes to these professional emails, especially if you're emailing a hiring manager or you're trying to get a job. If you keep those three things in mind, then, you're putting your best foot forward. And I think that is always the goal at the end of the day, because we all know an email anything can come across any particular kind of way when you're not being verbal. So you want to make sure that nothing can be misconstrued. You're being crystal clear. You're being kind. You're wishing them a great rest of their day. All of those things might feel like so small, but are so important at the end of the day.
Right.
Couldn't agree more.
And I can't, looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
That kind of thing, like just
setting a positive tone. Yes.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite sign-offs. One of my favorites is look forward to hearing from you. Or like, I love like a, hello, so-and-so, happy Tuesday. Like those are so, I love that. But yeah, just being kind and being polite and making it so that if somebody reads your email, they know what kind of person you are, is just setting yourself up for success.
Great team player. That's what you look like.
Yes. Yep. True.
Well,
Kristen, this was so good.
Always.
We're on the same page. No, this was super helpful. You gave us so many great insights and tips, as you always do. You come with so much amazing experience that shows through in all the lessons learned that you can share with us and our audiences. So we just really appreciate you taking the time to talk about email etiquette with us today. And for all of you watching, thank you for taking the time to hear about email etiquette. Hopefully this is something that can really help you as you're navigating your current job, if you have one, or future employment that you're trying to get.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is always great.
We always enjoy it. It's always filled with so many great tips and tricks, and just really, really appreciate all of your insight and expertise. So thank you so much to Kristen. Thank you to all of you for watching, and we will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Yeah.